Okay, here's a fun one. I've been a fan of Something Weird Video since sometime in the 90s. I discovered them as a company that released trailer tape compilations. You could buy, and this was before now on Blu-ray you can get a lot of trailer compilations, and there's some really good ones out there, but in the old days it was mail order companies who had trailers or 16 millimeter TV spots. They would transfer them and sell them, and Something Weird had a ton of those. So I used to buy those for trashy drive-in movies, and then I would get their catalog, and an entire world of cinema opened up to me. Mike Vraney, who started Something Weird Video, and his wife Lisa Petrucci, they collected films and they released films that were just totally lost and obscure and abandoned, and they built an empire. Sadly, probably not a terribly profitable one, but they built an empire in the hearts and minds of many fans of horror and trashy exploitation and sleaze films. And one of the films they released, they had gotten together with various impresarios and heads of old independent exploitation studios like Dave Friedman and Harry Novak, who ran a company called Box Office International and cranked out films in the 60s and 70s. Just mostly, a lot of skin. A lot of action in these movies. And they hooked up, they got the rights to the films and the posters and the materials, and they released these movies for years on videotape. Later, Image Entertainment released some of these movies on DVD, looking, a little bit better than they did on tape, or a lot better. And now, Something Weird really is mostly no more. They're still an entity, but they're not really releasing new videos very much. They've got a limited amount you can get on DVD-R, and now what they're doing is they're licensing out films they have the rights to other companies to put out these nice new Blu-ray editions and HD versions, and God help us, maybe 4K versions of some of these screwball exploitation classics. So I told you all that to tell you this. Severin Films just released A Scream in the Streets on Blu-ray. This is a movie that Something Weird had out for years on VHS, and then they put it out on DVD-R, and I believe this was one of the releases they did through Image, where they would pair two movies and put a lot of really cool extras from their vaults on there. Well, now Severin has A Scream in the Streets, and it looks phenomenal. It's a terrible movie, but it looks phenomenal. I'm not going to say it's not entertaining. Terrible isn't always a bad thing, as far as I'm concerned. So this is a movie I'd heard of, but I'd never seen, and I've now seen it. A Scream in the Streets, what's it about? That's a really great question. I asked you. I watched it, and I really probably couldn't tell you. Ostensibly, A Scream in the Streets is about a transvestite who goes around murdering women, and two cops who are on the trail of this killer. That's really kind of a framework to just have random, mostly disconnected to anything else in the movie, softcore sex scenes. Softcore means you don't see what would make it a hardcore sex scene. So you're watching the movie and you're like, well, they're running. Occasionally you'll see something happen where you're like, they're clearly not having sex, really. There's like somebody's wearing underwear, or somebody is clearly not in the mode to be doing it, let's say. So the film is somewhat explicit. This is beyond an R rating, let's say, but it's nothing that would probably cause it to be behind the squeaky Western doors in the old video store, if you know what I mean. And I think you do. It stars nobody of note. I don't believe I recognize. I've seen a lot of exploitation movies, films of all stripes. I don't think there was anybody in this that I really recognized. It's really pretty bad. The acting is bad. The camera work is bad. It's very 70s, and as you know in my other reviews, I'm a fan of the era in which I was born. Maybe because I wasn't completely cognizant in the 70s of a lot of things, so I'm fascinated to try to get as much knowledge about it as I can now, a period that I lived through. This is 73, so this is a year before I came into being, but it's California in the 70s. It is a Harry Novak Box Office International film, and as my friend Rick and I would say, Harry Novak, not the sign of quality. I think he probably did release a couple films I did find entertaining. And honestly, A Scream in the Streets is entertaining. Just be aware that while it might be marketed in its original posters as an action film or a crime film, it's really a sexploitation. It's really a softcore movie with a lot of sequences of unclothed people running and saying whatever goes through their mind at the time. But it is pretty funny. and it does look really good on this transfer. You know, it's limited to how it looked when it was shot. So if there weren't a lot of great colors and a lot of great photography, it's not going to look better than that. But it's razor sharp. The colors that are there are good. And it does, as I say, it sort of peels the gauze away a little bit of the decades, and it feels a little bit more contemporary or immediate, despite the clothing and the hairstyles and the music and the cars and the prices on anything that you see in the film. Despite all that, it doesn't feel like as old a movie as it is because it looks so much better than it ever did before. You can watch this in two different ways. It's kind of interesting. You can watch it full frame, 4:3, which is the incomplete film frame that was exposed, which generally just results in a little, you know, it goes from a composition like this to a composition that's like this. You get a little bit more headroom. I think it was probably really composed for widescreen, 1.85 widescreen, which is also an option on here. So you can watch it so that it sort of fills your screen, or you can watch it in a way that it might have looked in some theaters, or if you want just maximum 1973 image, you don't want any top of a hairstyle or bottom of a bell bottom to be cropped out, you can watch the 4:3 version. So it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous and it's a bad movie, but thank you, Severin, for putting this out on Blu-ray. Thank you for keeping movies like this in print. Thank you, Something Weird, for making sure these movies still get out there and are still seen by new people to be corrupted and demented by this wonderful insanity that you've curated for all these years. The extras are, I believe it's a trailer, and you get a couple of shorts. A couple of short subjects that were basically, I believe there were scenes that were shot for Scream in the Streets and just weren't used. So they are just two more random, completely disconnected sex scenes that have nothing to do with the movie you're watching, just like the sex scenes in the movie itself. So, not a lot more to say about this film. It's entertaining. If you like something weird stuff, if you like weird movies, if you like sleazy 70s movies, or if you just want to watch something that's going to make you laugh because you don't really understand completely what's going on, but in the end, the story does conclude. So like a lot of adult films of many eras, it sets up a story, there's a whole lot of rutting going on, and then at the end, they wrap the story up. Actually, it's better than a lot of adult films from all decades because they actually do wrap the story up. A Scream in the Streets, out now, Severin Films Blu-ray.